Hello and welcome to Lamplighter. Today is October 3. Today in our daily Bible reading, we turn to a fascinating story. It is the book of Esther. Now, Esther is what we often refer to as a post-exilic book, meaning it is written after the children of Israel have been in exile in both Assyria and Babylon. The time here is at a time when the temple has now been rebuilt and the people are now free to start looking at their own properties and their own land to be able to develop it and to try to get back to the kind of lifestyle they once had before the time of the captivity. The Persians are now in control of a large section of the world, and it is the Persians that are sort of in oversight over the people of Israel, the people of Judah. Now, we know that the king at this time is a king by the name of Xerxes, and it is not known what kind of relationship Xerxes has with Israel, at least at the beginning, but it does not appear that he has any particular animosity against the Jews. There are still many Jews in his own country, and although they do have enemies there, no official opposition is apparent. Now, Xerxes is basically going to leave the people of Israel alone, at least for a while, and that begins a new saga in this story. During his reign, one of the most fascinating stories of all Jewish history takes place. It is a story of royal intrigue at the royal palace in Susa. There is plot and counterplot. There is suspense and danger. There is unexpected twists of fate, and the final undoing of the villain is delightfully ironic. This is great theater. This is great drama that is happening here in the book of Esther. So let's begin to kind of unpack the story. Now, King Xerxes is a very proud king, and he decides during the third year of his reign that he's going to give this royal banquet for all of the nobles and officials of the land. So he invites them all to the palace, and he's basically just showing off. He has this feast that's going on for a full 180 days. He's displaying the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and the glory of his majesty. But when the time is over, the king is going to give this banquet. And during this banquet that lasts 7 days, he is giving the very best food, the very best wine. He's giving everybody his own special goblet from which to drink the wine. And when the party is really going full blast, so to speak, then he wants to invite the queen. Now, we've been told already that Queen Vashti is entertaining the women during this 7-day feast as well. Now, Queen Vashti is summoned by the king to come and to demonstrate her beauty before all of these nobles and officials that have gathered. And Vashti is not interested in being the subject of all of these men's lustful looks and all of these men's praising her husband for the beauty of the queen. She wants no part of any of that, and so she refuses to come. Well, this causes a problem because then the king is angry. He's been kind of embarrassed by his wife. He wants to know what needs to happen to punish her or to discipline her in some way. And so the royal officials kind of combine together and they get their thoughts together and they suggest to the king that she is not to be allowed to ever have anything to do with him again. She is to be exiled because after all the other women are watching her. They're fearful for themselves. They're thinking, if Vashti gets away with this in her disrespect and her disobedience to the king, then what are our wives going to do, they must think. And so they say to the king, you need to do something about this. You need to put her away from you and not allow her to come back into the palace. Well, the king agrees. But some time passes, and after some time passes, you kind of get the feeling that Xerxes is having his heart soften just a little toward Vashti. He misses her. And so these same nobles and officials come to him and they say, we've got an idea for you. They want to make sure that Vashti is not rewarded in any way. When they see that his heart is melting toward her again, they say, we think the king needs to choose a new queen. And so why don't you send your people throughout the land and gather some of the most beautiful women of the land and bring them into a harem and then they can go undergo beauty treatments for a period of time up to a year, and then they'll be presented one by one to the king, and the king can choose any of these women to be the next queen. Well, it sounds like a good idea to King Xerxes, and of course it sounds like a good idea. It's all in his favor. It's all to make sure he feels good about himself and feels good about his position as king and the power that comes along with that. So some women are gathered, and among these women we're introduced to a young woman by the name of Esther. Now, Esther has a cousin named Mordecai. Mordecai is one who has raised her because her own parents have died. And so Mordecai raises his younger cousin, Hadassah, and her name is Esther. And Esther is one that is selected for this harem. And when Esther goes before the king, she is going to be accepted by him. He loves her beauty, and she ultimately will be chosen to be the queen. Meanwhile, we are reintroduced to Mordecai, who's sitting at the king's gate, and he overhears a conversation between a couple of the king's men, and they're planning a conspiracy to kill the king. Mordecai makes sure that the king becomes aware of this conspiracy, this plot to kill him, and so the plot is extinguished, and these two men who were conspiring against the king are killed. They are hung on a gallows. Meanwhile, there's a man by the name of Haman introduced to us. And Haman is being lifted up to a position of prominence. He is being rewarded by the king, and he's feeling really good about himself. And as he prances before the people, all of the people are bowing down and recognizing and respecting him for his new position of power. But Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. And of all the people that are honoring him, he gets it kind of stuck in his craw that Mordecai is one who will not bow down to him. He knows that Mordecai is a Jew, and so Haman not only wants to get even with Mordecai, he wants to destroy all the Jews because he has been insulted by Mordecai. So Haman comes up with a plan that he presents to the king, that there is to be an edict passed by the king that all of these Jews who kind of live under their own rules, who don't really respect the authority of the governing nation, these people are causing trouble according to Haman, and they need to be completely annihilated. And for some reason, the king goes along with his suggestion, and an edict comes out that goes through all the land to the Jews to let them know on such and such a date, they will all be exterminated, so to speak. Their lives are going to be over, all at the hand of Haman. And this is an edict that has not only been approved by the king, he has sealed it with his signet ring, and it is passed according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which means that it cannot be changed. So now the people are in dire straits. What are they going to do? And Mordecai is going to challenge Esther. She's in a position, although her nationality at this time is not known to the king, Mordecai challenges her and says to her, who knows but what you've come to such royal position for such a time as this? You can stand up for your people. Esther explains to Mordecai that it is a dangerous thing because if the king doesn't summon her, it could mean her life. But ultimately, Mordecai challenges her again and says, this is going to happen. God is going to deliver his people. This deliverance will happen with or without you, Esther. So why not make it at a time when you have some influence with the king? You may have been called for this very moment. And so she agrees. I'm going to approach the king, and if I perish, I perish. It is the great unfolding of a wonderful story, a very dramatic story filled with twists and turns, and we'll see more of the culmination of that story in our reading tomorrow. It's interesting that the book of Esther never mentions the name of God, and yet you can see the hand of God in everything that unfolds. And remember, even when his name is not mentioned, this is not a story about Esther. It's a story about God. Isn't it great to be a lamplighter? His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I hope you have a blessed day.